Had over 20 overdoses. Three of them I was pronounced dead. And somehow I came back from those. And one of them, coincidentally, it was pouring rain. I was behind an abandoned building in Newark and nobody was there. It was just me. I had gotten my drugs and I went behind the building and I did my stuff. And that's all I remember. I woke up to a homeless man on top of me giving what I thought at first, this is crazy, but I thought he was trying to take advantage of me, like while I was unconscious. And then I started freaking out. I started swinging on the guy. I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? Because he was giving me mouth to mouth. He's like, man, he's like, you were just dead. He's like, I just saved your life. You were purple. And it was pouring rain. So I'm laying on my back in the pouring rain behind an abandoned building. He should, like, coincidentally, he had walked back behind the building to get high. That man ended up becoming a good friend of mine.
Welcome back to the Invest in Yourself podcast. Today I'm joined by Will Milligram, who is a former drug addict. Will explains how he used drugs for 15 years and went to over 40 rehab centers. We go into detail how he made his money and survived on the streets while being homeless. Will has overdosed on drugs a few times and he was fortunately brought back to life to share his life story. Sit back and enjoy this interview today and learn how Will was able to kick the drugs. Please subscribe to my channel for more interviews like this. He's got quite the redemption story, so without further ado, let's get into Will's story. Hey, Will, thank you for coming on my podcast, man. How you doing today?
Of course, I'm doing great, man. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, well, you really fit with what my show is and what I'm trying to get more stories out there like yours. People that were involved with ex criminals, former addicts,
Yeah,
former mobsters, gangsters. I mean,
yeah,
it all comes down to changing your life around and really helping people out today. So, for
that's right.
you, with your background, I think the best way to get into this interview today is give a people some background on your early life and what it was like for you growing up.
Yeah, man, no problem. So, my name is Will. I'm from a small town in New York called Brewster. Um, I grew up. Um, Honestly, younger years were good. My family would, everybody was together, everybody was coming together. We'd go on vacations. But at a very young age, I started experiencing. There was a lot of red flags going on at a very young age. Anything I would do, I'd be extremely obsessive over it, whether it be dirt bikes, whether it be motorcycles. It didn't matter what it was. I took it to an extreme. You know, uh, I had my first drink. I was probably 8 or 9 years old. I remember, you know, I uh, I reached up on the counter. My mother used to drink wine while she was cooking dinner and everything like that. And she like ran into the bathroom or something. And while she was in there, I like reached up on the counter and took a you know, big slug of her glass. And I remember I went into the living room and I was hanging out and like not long after I took that sip, like I actually felt like warm. I'm like, huh. I'm like, this is different. I had a lot of energy. I was like bouncing around the house. And from that moment at such a young age, I knew that something was wrong. Like at that age, being 9 years old, like I had a gut feeling that I've just always searched for, you know, like an exterior feeling. I was never okay just sitting in my own skin. Whether I was looking for adrenaline, whether I was looking for trouble, whatever it may be, I was always getting outside of myself. But not to get off track, but so around 13, 12 years old or so, my mother and father ended up splitting up. um and for me, that's where everything kind of took a turn. My mother and father separated, and I was in that space where it's like, all right, do you want to stay with your mom? Do you want to stay with your dad? And when I'd go see my dad would be like, oh, come stay with me. When I would stay with my mother would be like, why don't you stay with me? So, it was like in between a rock and a hard place. And, shortly after, or right around that time, actually, that my mother and father had separated, I ended up doing my first painkiller. during that time.
What happened with that?
So interesting, interesting story. I was actually, I'll never forget it. It was Christmas Eve. I couldn't even tell you the year, but I was, 12, 13 years old. It was Christmas Eve. I was at my uncle's house, and one of my cousins had just had shoulder surgery. And I heard them in the kitchen talking about, oh, you're going to get effing addicted to those painkillers if you don't stop taking it. And I'm like, and I've heard people talking about it at that age, like we were smoking pot, we were doing all different types of stuff. So I heard people talk about Percocet and and I had never done it. And when I found out that my cousin, had just had surgery and he had a bottle of Percocet somewhere in his room, I went into his room and I saw two bottles on his dresser. I didn't know which one was which, right? I had no clue. I just literally like eeny meeny miny mo picked one, and it ended up being the right one.
Huh.
I remember within the matter, about an hour later, um, me and my sister had left, and I like told her what I did, and the feeling that I had was feeling in that time was everything I was looking for and some, you know.
Well,
Um,
I was gonna say, like when you were in this kind of state of mind as a young kid, like what did you know, like that it was supposed to get you messed up, or you had to have known if you were wanting to take a
yeah,
pill, right? I mean, at
yeah.
that age already.
So I was, during that time, my parents had split up. I obviously was gravitating towards people that were in similar situations as me, other kids that were living in broken homes and, they were going out and pretty much had no rules. They were smoking, drinking every day. Like I wanted to be a part of that. And at that point they were dibbling and dabbling and I had heard, oh, Percocet, this, that, oxycodone. And that was my opportunity to give it a try. It hadn't have been, it wasn't in front of me yet. And from that moment, um everything changed from that moment.
What had changed? Like,
Well, my view on, I used to, I used to be very, like I was saying, I'd always be looking to, get outside of myself, and whether it was adrenaline, eventually it gradually went into drugs. But from that moment, I realized that, there was so much that I thought I was lacking within my own life, right? Because I took this one little pill, and within the matter of a couple hours, I was able to talk to girls. I was able to run around and have a good time and express myself. I was able to feel confident in my own skin, and the next morning when that feeling, I woke up and that feeling was gone. Um, I had realized, I'm like, oh my God, like that's how I want to feel. That's what I've been missing this whole time,
hmm,
because it gave me this false sense of confidence. It gave me this feeling that I couldn't describe, and shortly after this happened, I was in a snowboarding accident. Shortly after this happened, I was in a snowboarding accident that led to, you know, me getting prescribed Oxycontin when it was the original Oxycontin.
what's the difference? Is it like more stronger back then, or
Yeah, so the original, like they don't make them anymore, not that I'm aware of, but yeah, the original Oxycontin was, it was real deal. They had the 20s, the 40s, 60s, 80s, and at I was literally 13 turning 14, they put me on Oxy 20s. And that is where, from that moment moving forward, through my teens, everything progressed and went downhill. And there was a few points throughout, from around, I was 13, 14 years old when I had gotten that injury and was prescribed this medication. I was on it for like a year, And all of a sudden, the doctor, like, I kept milking it. I was going to physical therapy. It's crazy. At that age, I was like trying to manipulate the situation to continue taking those pills. It's almost like it was instilled in me before I even knew, like, how to work the system. And, it's
That's
crazy.
that's what I was gonna ask you. I was gonna say, so that's what I was. You kind of answered it, was because like I was wondering how you were able to do it for so long, and then after that year was up, what did you end up doing
Well,
after that? How did you get it?
so come the end of my prescription, where I was prescribed it, and the doctor was giving me a smaller amount, then he'd bring me back up a little bit. So there was a point where I got cut off. I was probably closer to 15 at this point. At that age, I was using substances on a daily basis. Pretty much, whether it was weed, alcohol, anything I can get my hands on. There was a couple kids around town that were able to get, you know, pretty much the same exact thing that I was taking. So that's where that started spiraling again. I did at one point stop taking them for around 6 months, when the doctor cut me off, to, when I found them again on the street. There was like a 6 month gap where I was just smoking, I was drinking, and I was taking Xanax as well. And but I started buying them off the street, and then coincidentally, my father had gotten into a pretty bad accident back then as well, and that made it even worse. There comes the accessibility again. He wouldn't take them. He would get bottles and bottles and bottles of them, and he would take one like every now and then when he was in pain. So he had, a stash of painkillers at his house. And that's when, you know, come around 15, 16 years old, I ended up moving in with him because he was more like relaxed. He let me do my thing. I knew he had these pills in his house. And at that point, by the time I'd say 16, 17 years old, I was full blown. Um, I had a very bad opiate habit at that age.
Now,
Um,
were you having any side effects from it that you've noticed when you're in that age?
100%. So I used to, and it's kind of wild when I look back on it. So when I was living at my dad's, um, there was a point where I was going to the doctor. I'm not even kidding, like 4 or 5 times a month, because I always felt like I had the flu. I always felt like, in the middle of the night, I'd be drenched in sweat. Like the comforter would be soaked. I'd have to get up, change my clothes. And I would be going to the doctor, consistently, nonstop, thinking like there was something wrong with me. And then one day, a buddy picked me up, and I was like, dude, like, I've been sick, like, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, you're sick? He's like, what do you mean? And I'm like, I don't know. I keep getting, he's like, no. He's like, you're dope sick. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I had no clue at that age. I had no clue the consequences that come with taking prescription, or, Oxycontin. I was in withdrawals for months and months and months before I even realized what it was. So that same day, where my buddy was like, "Oh, you're dope sick," like, we were actually going to get something. I went and I did my what I had picked up. Within a matter of a few minutes, all my symptoms went away. I felt totally normal, and like I could function again. And I was like, and it clicked. I was like, "Oh my god!" Like, I was like, he's right. Like, I'm physically now dependent to these drugs.
How did that make you feel?
It was scary, because all this time, thinking like I was sick, or I had a cold or a flu. Um, all this time, I was just battling addiction and withdrawals, and at such a young age. It was and at that point, though, I had accepted it. And once it, made sense in my head, like, okay, I need to take these pills in order to feel normal. There was never a day where from that moment, There was never a day where I didn't have them. There was never a day I didn't take them. It became my medicine, you know.
How
And
much? I was going to say, how much did these cost? Were you able to get them at a quantity or a couple at a time,
so
or
at the time they were still real, at the time when I was using these pills. Nowadays everything's fake and you can get them for dirt cheap. At that time, we were paying, like, when we buy one of them, we were paying $25 a pill, for a
damn?
30 milligram Oxycontin. And but as time went on, they got more and more expensive. They became 30 a piece. Doesn't matter how many of them you buy. And then that's when, one night this was around, you know, 18 years old. So let me backtrack a little bit.
Okay,
So from when I noticed, okay, Will's, I'm sick now. I need these pills. At that point, I was 17. And I had told my parents, I said, guys, I need help. I said, I can't stop. I said, I've been doing these pills, and they knew something was wrong. They didn't know what it was. And at that age, I might have just turned 17, but I went to my first adolescent detox in Carmel, New York. And I was there for only 7 days. I thought that was going to fix me. Um, I insisted on still smoking pot, and I ended up going on Suboxone. And immediately when that little stint finished up, I left and I was right back to it. Um, right back to it. And that is when I found, with these pills being that at that price, $30 a piece, it would take me three of them just to feel better. So,
damn.
$90 just to get going in the morning is a lot of money. And, that's when a buddy of mine, not really a buddy, a person that, was always around, introduced me to heroin. I had like $20, and I couldn't, nobody had any pills or anything. And he was like, hey man, like, I can give you, 2 bags of this, and it'll get you way more fucked up. And it'll make you feel better. You're not going to be sick anymore. And, I remember that day very vividly too. The first day I had no clue. Uh, I mean, obviously you hear stories about, oh, I'll never do this, I'll never do that. But at that age, I was desperate enough where I tried it. And it didn't immediately progress the way it did down the road. It took some time, but I immediately at that point as well, rediscovered, like, oh, this is how I want to feel for the rest of my life. Like I did when I was 13, when I had first found that painkiller. Um, so it opened up a lot of new doors, that I was not ready for, and I was not prepared for. Um,
Well, I would imagine, man, because you go from doing this pill every day to doing the heroin, and with the heroin, how do you even do it? I mean, at that time, were you just
so
smoking it, or in
yeah,
because you can inject it too?
at that age, I was snorting it. I snorted it for till I was probably 21 years old. So I had a couple years where I was just snorting it, and there came a point where, I was at that point, I went to a couple more rehabs. And at around 20, 21 years old, my parents were like, all right, like, we need to figure something out. That was the first time I went to Florida for rehab. That was like my first, real facility that I went to. It was in South Florida. And to be honest, it was the worst thing that could have happened to me.
How
Um,
come?
Well, I went to a place where there was about, 50 or 60 other people just like me that, a lot of them did not want to change. And it was pretty much like I learned more in there than I did out on the street, at that time. I mean, I still had a lot of I had a lot more reservations in my head. I was not done using, and that is actually where I picked up the needle for the first time. Is when I got out of that treatment center back in I think it was like 2012. I had went down there for the first time. I went to a sober living, and I picked up a needle for the first time. And from that day, I picked up the needle. There was another, hey, this is how I want to feel for the rest of my life. And that, honestly, from that moment on, that is where things got really bad. Like, from that moment on, I didn't think things could get much worse. Like when I was snorting the heroin and, robbing, cheating, stealing to get it, it was just the beginning. It got way, way, way worse. Within the matter of I was in Florida now, and within the matter of probably 3 years, I went to another 20 treatment facilities in the matter of 3 years. I
It's a lot.
was Yeah, no, I know, I've been to 44 treatment facilities before I found sobriety, but I'll get into that.
Yeah.
But
Well,
yeah,
well, well, yeah. I mean, like it for you, it with going through what you went through, and you have to be ready for it. And we'll get to that
that's right.
point to where but you just were never ready for it at that time. And when you went to Florida, you made all these connections with all these other people that were
That's right.
doing the same thing. So when you're around that, and they give you new ideas, they give you new ways. I would imagine they, to inject it was one of them. And then what
Yeah.
about making money? Like, how were you able to support a habit? Did they give you any ideas on how you could continue?
Yeah, yeah. So, and when I was in Florida, right? I mean, at that point, like, my family didn't see me on the regular. They were helping me out, every now and then they'd send me a little money. Hey, here's some grocery money. It all went to drugs. But, that's when at that point, I began boosting. I began stealing and selling the stuff that I was stealing, and just to feed my habit. And that was a point where I had when I was in Florida, I had injected cocaine for the first time. And that actually brought me to a whole nother low. So to bring it up to speed, it's I'm around 23 years old at this point. um, I'm in South Florida, jumping from sober living to sober living, halfway house to halfway house. Um, I had met a girl who now, is my daughter's mother. I met her down there. We ended up, together. She ended up getting pregnant. And after about 5 years of being in Florida, she was pregnant at this point, and she's from Jersey originally. So we were like, you know what? Let's get the hell out of here. Like, let's go back to New York, and, we'll have our family support. I was able to get sober again. She was sober, and I thought things were going to start going good. We had a new baby on the way. I had just gotten sober again. I was working an actual job. I was, getting ready to take care of a family, and I I had relapsed while we moved back up to New York, and I relapsed right before my daughter was born, unfortunately. Um,
What was the
and
what was the trigger that occurred?
to be honest, I can't necessarily put my finger on it, because I don't there was so many moving parts at that point. Like, to be honest, it could have been, I was stressed, I was overworked, I wasn't sleeping, I wasn't taking care of myself, I was focused on, taking care of everybody else. And it got to a point where, I started one day. I remember I got up and I got like a couple pills within the matter of a day. I was back on heroin. Um, I ended up, after my daughter was born, I decided I needed to get help again. Um, and but this time it was different, right? Because I have this, my daughter is my world. And to be honest, if she wasn't here, I don't think I'd be here whatsoever. Her being here gave me incentive to want to do better, and more of a drive to change my life. And you know, they say like you can't get sober for anybody else but yourself, and I unfortunately it's very true. I mean, you can use people as motivators and reasons to keep going, but it'll never be like over time. It never sticks. Like it's like, yeah, I could use my daughter as motivation, but 4 or 5 months down the road, she may not be the only reason. There's so many like the addictive mind is very intricate, and it's tough sometimes. So I went back into treatment after my daughter was born. I think she was like 3 or 4 months old. Um, I came home, and my daughter and her mother, they were like, we've had enough. They moved back to New Jersey, and that completely shattered me. At that point, um, I was devastated from that, and um, that was the beginning of the three most the worst bottom that I've ever hit in my life. That was the last 3 years, I was using. So I ended up coming home. I couldn't see my daughter right away. She was gone. I was living in a house with my mother, and I had had enough. I was like, all right, like I'm done. I was like, I'm gonna go and go off until whatever happens. I kind of didn't care if I lived or died, because I was more like, all right, I can't see my kid. I don't have my daughter's mother anymore. And I was like, what do I have? I was miserable. Um, so I had gone to New Jersey. Um, I've always heard about Newark, New Jersey, and I had never experienced it. But with my daughter living in New Jersey, in my head I was like, you know what, I was like, maybe it's a good idea if I try to find some sober living and live out in New Jersey. And it ended up being literally the worst thing that could have happened to me. Newark, New Jersey is where, my life took a turn. That, I saw things, I experienced things, I lived through things that no human should ever have to experience. I ended up homeless out in Newark, New Jersey for about 9, 10 months. And it was one of the most vicious places that I've ever experienced. Um, the things that people think don't exist, like it's real in Newark, right? Like they have, dole poles where you can knock on the door and a doorman lets you in, and then they serve you and then you leave. There's shootings every single day. There's crooked cops. There's, it's a dangerous place, and nothing good came from it. So I ended up homeless out there. I ended up, um, at this point I had been to close to 40 rehabs throughout my journey. From, from 17 years old to, you know, 25 years old. I had been to around 40 rehabs. And at this point I was daily, every single day, shooting cocaine and fentanyl. My addiction progressed to fentanyl. Out in New Jersey, it was very very big out there. That's literally all you can get was fentanyl.
With fentanyl, I mean, that's we see it all today. I mean, in
Yeah.
the news all the time and stuff. It's a big killer. So you got addicted to that.
Hmm.
How did that happen, and what was the situation? Because that's a
Yeah.
big deal. That's a very big
Yeah.
deal, man.
So there was a couple times, right, when I was homeless out there, that I had gotten a bag and I was like, holy shit. I was like, this is like really strong. And like I wouldn't do go to that exact spot for like a couple weeks, so like I wouldn't have it again. And I never knew. I was like, I just thought I got some good stuff. You know what I mean? I was like, all right, this is some good stuff. And about I remember this other homeless kid out there, right around my age. Me and him like gravitated towards each other because we were both white kids in a ghetto, and we looked out for each other. And one day he's like, "Yo," he's like, "I know where we can get some really good stuff." He walked me up to this, literally, it's like a hole in the side of a building. And he's like, "Yo," and I got it. I got my stuff. He's like, "Hey, be careful with that. That's Fetty." And I was like, "That's what?" He's like, "Fentanyl." He's like, "Yeah, they cut it with fentanyl, so it's stronger." And I was like, "Okay, I know fentanyl is like a painkiller. They give it to you in the hospital." I didn't know much about it at that point. And that day when I did it, I remember I had the same feeling that I felt a couple weeks prior when I had went to that other spot to cop, and I was like, "Holy shit, I'm like, is it this strong every time?" He's like, "Yeah, man." He's like, "This stuff is serious." And literally, um I thought heroin was bad, right? Like my addiction, I thought it was terrible when I was on heroin. Fentanyl brought me to a place of, almost like drug induced, like my mental health was gone. I was shooting fentanyl and cocaine on a daily basis. And literally it got to a point, where I would be awake for 5, 6 days at a time. Hearing things, seeing things, I was slowly withering to a point where I remember I used to like wash up and clean myself up at the Newark airport. They would let the homeless people like kind of hang out there and use their bathrooms. And I remember I went in there and I had the same, sweater and sweatpants on for 8 weeks. I had a pair of shoes that were 2 sizes too small for me. And at that point, I remember looking in the mirror in that bathroom, and I swear to you, I didn't even know who I was. I had no clue who I was. I don't know what had happened. It's almost like I was dreaming for the last like decade, and I had woke up in that bathroom looking at myself in the mirror. Um, and I had a lot of physical consequences from my addiction at that point. I had a lot of my whole face was picked. I had track marks up all over my arms, up my neck, all over the place. And at that point, I was like, all right, like I'm either going to end it or I need to figure out something because this is not working and I'm miserable. Like even when it's like I couldn't live with the drugs and I couldn't live without them. You know, it was like I was in such a delusional, tough place that that was the first time in my life where I actually did not want to live. Um, so.
Were you seeing other addicts and homeless people around you doing the drugs? I'm sure you did. I mean,
Oh,
what
dude.
were there any of them dropping dead right there from
Yeah.
all this stuff?
Yeah.
Or
I've seen it a couple times. So in Newark, man, it's literally like an open air drug market, and the police drive up and down the block, and they'll see people shooting dope on the side of the road. You're smoking crack. They don't want to deal with it. They'd rather go after the guns and go after the drug dealers, and it's almost like it's legal. Like they don't bother you. Unless they don't like you. And if they don't like you, they're going to make your life miserable. But yeah, I mean, we've seen, I've stumbled upon, I'll never forget one day I was literally walking down the street and I watched a guy, he was walking on the other side of the street, and I watched him just out of nowhere, like lights out, face first, smashed his face on the pavement. um, and people were just walking by him. Nobody was helping him. Nobody was seeing if he was okay. And I had ran over um, to see if he was all right, and he was overdosing clearly. And at that point, I didn't have a cell phone. Um, I didn't have a phone, and I'm yelling. I'm like, "Somebody call 911. This guy's overdosing." Nobody called 911. Nobody was calling 911. So I went down to like a store that was right down the street, and I was like, hey, like, send an ambulance because some guy up there is dying. Um, and I don't know what happened to that particular guy. I don't know if he made it or not, but out there, it's a ruthless place, man. By the grace of God, I've had over 20 overdoses. Three of them I was pronounced dead. And somehow I came back from those. And one of them, coincidentally, it was pouring rain. I was behind an abandoned building in Newark, and nobody was there. It was just me. I had gotten my drugs and I went behind the building and I did my stuff, and that's all I remember. I woke up to a homeless man on top of me giving what I thought at first, like, this is crazy, but I thought he was trying to take advantage of me, like, while I was unconscious. Um, and then I started freaking out. I started swinging on the guy. I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? Because he was giving me mouth to mouth. Um, and he's like, man, he's like, you were just dead. He's like, I just saved your life. You were purple. And it was pouring rain. So I'm laying on my back in the pouring rain behind an abandoned building. Um, there's no reason he should, like, coincidentally, he had walked back behind the building to get high. And
That's
that man ended up becoming a good friend of mine. He ended up, his name is, well, he went by Quills, and me and him, from that day, we stuck together. He always looked out for me. Being a white kid in a neighborhood like that, man, like, I was dealing with stuff on a daily basis. Every single day there was a problem. And I wouldn't even bother nobody. I would just be walking, and if anybody didn't like the way I looked, they're not afraid out there, that's for sure. They come up and, I've had guns put in my chest for no reason, saying empty your pocket for no reason at all. Just sitting at the park one day, some guy, you know, they called him Blue Eyes. He came up and literally just no reason put a gun in my right up to my chest and was like, empty your pockets. And I'm like, and at first I looked at him and I was like, dude, I don't have anything. And he was like, you think I'm fucking around? Empty your pockets. I emptied my pockets. I actually had a bag in my back pocket. And
yeah.
he didn't obviously check my back pockets. But the moment he noticed I didn't have anything, because I see this guy on a daily basis walking around, the moment he realized I didn't have anything, he goes, just kidding, and put the gun away and walked away. So I'm like, all right, dude, this guy was literally about to, trying to rob me. He realized I didn't have anything on me and was like, all right, well, I'm going to see this kid tomorrow. So now I need to pretend like, it's crazy out there, man.
Well, I mean,
Um,
was he an addict as well?
yes,
Oh,
everybody, I don't even want to, but just about everybody, man, out in Newark that's walking around, and everybody's on heroin, every fentanyl. Um, it's,
well,
I would say, literally like probably 80%, 90% of people out there are on drugs of some sort, you know?
so, so you were around a lot of these people in these neighborhoods and stuff, and they were just, where were you living? Because, I mean, you were just living on the street then, I guess. I mean, you
Yeah.
were living
Yeah.
with anybody, I guess.
No, abandoned buildings, you know, anywhere I can get some shelter, and there was a good spot actually, and this is actually pretty ironic. There's a place in Newark called Integrity House. It is like a rehab for people coming out of prison, and coincidentally they had like a cellar that led to the street, and I used to go down there and sleep under this stairwell down there, and every morning, they would take a walk, all the clients that are in there, and they would I'd usually be up, and they would always give me a cigarette, and I would walk with them around the block every single morning. Around It was like 6 o'clock every morning. Um, and like at that point, I was I wish I could have been a part of what they were doing, you know? Like I hated where my life had taken where my life had gone, you know? At this point I was full blown homeless. I was living that homeless lifestyle, you know, and I didn't see a way out. You know, I didn't see a way out whatsoever.
When
So
when did that kind of start happening? I mean, was your family around trying to help you out or trying to get you sober? Well,
they,
obviously, they had throughout your whole life. I mean, because
yeah,
you put you into all
yeah.
those treatments. But I mean, at that point, when you were really down at your worst, what was like changing? When did it start to turn around for
So
you?
so they, one there was a day where me and my father were in contact, and he's like, "Hey, why don't you come home?" He's like, "I'll get you a hot shower. We'll get some food. We'll talk." And it was like 2 in the morning, and he literally out of nowhere, I was curled up in a ball on the side of the road with my head in my hoodie because it was freezing out, and I was blowing hot air into my hoodie, and all of a sudden I hear like a horn, bam, bam, like nonstop, and it was like right in front of me. So I, took my hoodie off, and my dad was there. My dad had actually drove out to Newark from New York, and knew where I was hanging out, and he said, he was like, "Get in the fucking car," he's like, "We're going home," and I ended up getting in the car. Um, he brought me home, and then the next day, my mom and dad, I woke up. My mom was at the house. My dad was there, and you know, my mom and dad were like, "Listen, like, you are gonna die, and we have one more opportunity for you to get sober, and this is it." They're like, "We want you to try something different." It was a very small and intimate setting that I'm used to these big rehabs that have 50, 60 people in it. This particular rehab was a maximum capacity of 6 people. So it was a lot of one-on-one help. And my dad actually was like, I was like, "I'm not going anywhere." He's like, "I'll tell you what." He's like, "I will give you $20. You go do what you got to do." Um, he's like, "Take my car." He's like, "If you're not back here in an hour to go to rehab," he's like, "I'm done." He's like, "I will never." He's like, "I won't be able to communicate with you. I won't be able to speak with you." And my mother, looked at me and was like, "Will, just try one more time." She was like, "One more time. And if you don't succeed," she's like, "I will know that my son did everything he could to get better." Um, whatever that looked like, whether I passed away, whether I ended up in prison for the rest of my life, she would have, that's what she needed for herself. She said, "Just go one more time." And I went and got my stuff, and within the matter of 3 hours, I was on a plane to California for the last time, to treatment for the last time. Um, that was December 15th of 2019. I went to back to rehab. Um, now we'll get into like the good, joyful stuff.
Yeah, here we go.
I
That's good.
Yeah, I went back to rehab for the last time. The treatment was phenomenal. It was something that I've never experienced before because there wasn't a bunch of people in there. It was very personal. It was all one on one. I was getting the help I needed. So I stayed there for a few weeks, and I ended up going to a sober living in New Jersey. Within the matter of 2 weeks, I knew that I was like, if I stay here, I'm gonna mess up. I knew it. And so I called my father and I said, "Dad," I said, "this isn't working here. I need to come home, and I will do whatever it takes." And I have a best friend that I grew up with and ran with who got sober back in, oh my God, when he was 20. So he was like 5 or 7 years sober at this point. He lived near my dad. So I came home. I lived with my dad. I got a bullshit job. I was going to meetings every day. I started truly taking care of the things I needed to. I have one of my best friends who literally guided me through, the ins and outs. I learned about myself. I learned why I was doing what I was doing. And, it took time. This didn't happen in 20 days. It took months for me to, slowly get back on track, and for my mental state as well. Cause at this point, I was in a very, very, very bad, depression, and I had no dopamine left at all. And, I remember I was like 70 something days sober, and I almost went to a psych unit. I almost admitted myself to a mental health hospital because I just couldn't, I was so, I was having a hard time, but I didn't give up. The one thing I did right was I did not get high, and I did not get drunk, and shortly after, within the matter of another month, like I started having these breakthroughs, and like I um I ended up, the place that I went to rehab at, I ended up getting more involved with their facility, and they offered me a job. I was like 6, 7 months sober at this time. They offered me a job. I took the job. I ended up being like, wow, like I love this, and this is what I want to do. I never knew what I wanted to do with myself, and I ended up finding a passion for helping other people, and I worked with them for years. I worked with them. Go ahead.
I was going to say, yeah, it really helped you maintain your sobriety while helping other people get sober as well. So
Well,
it's, goes hand in hand with each other, really.
that's right.
And so you really enjoyed this job, though. It gave you some kind of purpose, meaning that you could do every single day, right?
That's
Or
right.
how are
Well,
you feeling
that's
about it?
that's exactly, you hit the nail on the head. So like, if I didn't, I know this sounds crazy, but like we complicate addiction. Like, realistically, what was my solution was helping other people. That was the thing that I was missing this whole time. Without fulfillment and without having a bigger purpose, it's hard to want to continue to stay clean and continue to better yourself. Like, when people are coming to you saying, hey, that talk we had yesterday allowed me to stay sober for one more day. That was like, becoming my purpose, helping other people. And I started bringing it to social media. I decided that a friend of mine, Connor, my best friend who was helping me in early recovery, he told me, he's like, hey, man, like, I started this TikTok page, and it's going really well. I'm making content about addiction and recovery. And at this point, he had like, 90,000 followers. Now he's got upwards of a half a million. And,
Yeah.
he showed me that, and things took off. I had a couple very, viral videos. And from that point, I realized, like, okay, like people are listening to what I have to say, and I'm getting a lot of good feedback, and I have these resources that most people don't have access to. I'm very big on networking. So every rehab that I went to throughout my journey, I like built a relationship, whether it was with a staff member, the owner, the nurse, whatever the case may be. Like, I was always networking throughout this process. Um, so it was very beneficial in a way, right? For where I'm at now, going to all these treatment centers, I built an insane network of people that I could rely on for whether it's helping other people, if I need anything. It became something that I was like, I have something here, I have a purpose. And me and my best friend, we were doing this work together. We were helping other people. And we got to a point, we were working with a treatment facility. It was actually the same facility that I got sober at. We were both working with them. We were helping their patients. We were doing all different types of stuff. And there were some things that we didn't agree with. There were some things that we were like, man, it it didn't feel right. Honestly, I think that over time they became more money focused instead of, keeping their at first it was about helping people. But then eventually it became, let's do whatever we got to do to make the most money. And we didn't like that. We didn't like that. And me and Connor, my best friend, we decided to branch off and do our own thing. Um, we learned that this industry that we're in, the treatment industry, um, there's a lot of gray areas, and there's not a lot of people that are doing the right thing and that, aren't hiding behind the scenes. So us having these social media platforms, we decided to, we wanted to open our own treatment facility, and we didn't know how we were going to do it. We didn't have the capital for it. We didn't, you know, there was no plan yet. We just knew we wanted to do it. And I'll never forget, Connor made a video saying in 6 months, we're going to have our own treatment facility. He's like, I don't know how we're going to do it, but we're going to do it. Um, Literally, not even 90 days later, we opened up our first 6-bed detox residential treatment facility in Southern California. Um,
He spoke it
we
into the universe, man. That's for
That's
sure.
right. That's right. And man, we did something that we didn't even think we were capable of, or we didn't think it was possible. But we didn't give up, and we kept working hard, and we kept doing the next right thing, and things tended to start making sense and all happening the way it should. And an opportunity, came across fell into our lap, and it was perfect. Like, it was almost like the universe had created this opportunity for us. Um, and we somehow were able to make it work, and here we are. We have our own dual diagnosis treatment facility, and the people that are in the facility are doing incredible. And we go there consistently, we check in on everybody, we show our face, and we interact with the patients because it's what we love to do. A lot of these other programs, the owners tend to hide behind the scenes. They just collect their money. We want to be as in the mud as possible. We love it,
Well,
you
that's what
know.
makes you guys different.
Exactly, man. And I think that's what is going to have us in a place where we're going to continuously grow, is because we have nothing to hide. Right? I don't care. I will open up my, we have done every single thing from start to finish the ethical and proper way. And the reason we did that is so we don't have to worry about this being a short lived thing. We want longevity. We want to continue to help people and grow and, you know, create all of these beautiful things in the world that everybody else has opportunity to do as well. You know?
Yeah, and I think with what you're doing is it's good. It's a good positive way to you're putting out good things into the world. And like with what you were doing before, when you're on the streets doing drugs and stuff, all you could think of was just doing negative, negative, negative. And now that you're out of that mindset, that addiction, now you're doing good things, and now good things are happening for you
That's
that
right.
you guys didn't even think was possible. But like you said, even before your 6 month mark, you guys were already getting it. So that just goes to show that you do
Yeah,
good things are going to happen, man. And like
that's
you
right.
in when you had mentioned, like before we got onto the whole good topic, good part of this interview was that we talked about your background, your past, and all the bad stuff that happened. But in order to really paint a picture for people to understand where you're at now and that it's possible to change, we have to talk about the past. And that's
That's
exactly
right.
what you did today, man.
Yeah,
And
man. I really believe, guys, for anybody that's watching it and watching this, and anybody, if you can get through your struggles, if you shift your mindset and utilize all those struggles as like tools and assets, there's going to be nothing that you can't accomplish, right? I used to have this drive about, like, when it came to drugs, there was not a single thing in the world that could have gotten in the way of me getting drugs. Now, there is not a single thing that's going to get in the way of me pursuing my dreams and me, figuring out any obstacle that's put in front of me. Um, I mean that. Like, I don't care. I will make absolutely, you know, something from nothing at all time, doesn't matter when, where, I will make it happen. And I feel like that's the one thing about, people that have struggled with addiction is they have this, go-getter mindset that, to be honest, it's not as common as, it's not that common to have that mindset where I'm going to make it happen no matter what. I'm going to stay in my lane, I'm going to focus, and I'm going to achieve my goals. It's very difficult to do that in the day and age we live. A lot of people will settle for a good job, right? A good job, and live as a in a position where they're, probably making somebody else very wealthy and they're barely making ends meet. You know, um, we live in a time where the opportunity is endless, and if you can believe it enough, like within your own heart and mind, not a single thing that can't be accomplished.
That's absolutely true, man. What advice would you give like parents that are dealing with because they're your parents were in your position,
Yeah,
they sent you to so many treatment centers. What would you give
yeah.
them to help out with their their child that's an addict?
Well, nowadays, nowadays the what's going around on the streets is lethal. Like it's all super drugs. They're not what it used to be. And if a parent right now, if there's of course there's parents out there, their children are struggling. Like, set aside your pride and get them the help they need, because I promise you, people that are dealing with addiction, these young kids that are, they're buying perk 30s off of the street. They're not perk 30s. They're fentanyl pressed pills. They're buying these pills at 15 years old, and they are opening up a door that they have no clue how to close. They have no clue how to handle. And to be honest, this stuff is killing people every day. Um, for parents, like, something I see often, a lot of people reach out to me on my page. Parents, they say, "Oh, my son doesn't want help," or "I'm nervous about what other people are going to think about us. My son going to rehab, this and that." Like, if you're if you have a child living in your home that's using drugs and they don't want help, you need to give them an ultimatum. Hey, you're living under my roof. If you are not willing to accept help, go and figure it out. I know that's a little harsh, and I know that's very hard to do as a parent, but it's the only way that it's the only way that these people are going to hit a bottom. If they have somebody coming to their rescue all the time, and if they have somebody enabling their behaviors, it's never going to stop. um as far as a lot of families are worried, they're worried about what the community is going to think of them. They're worried about, oh, what is my friend Nancy going to look at me like? Who gives it? Like, your child is the most important thing. As a parent, my child is the most important thing in my life. And if my daughter was struggling and if I knew it, there's not a single thing in this planet that would get in the way of me getting her the help she needs. I know it's hard, right? Like, being a parent myself now, I I know what I put my mother and father through growing up. And it wasn't intentional. I did not know how much it was affecting them. I did not know how much I was putting them through. But, in a weird way, you will get farther with setting boundaries, having tough love, and, you know, doing what makes the most sense versus doing what is comfortable. A lot of families, they have a big heart for their children and they don't want to lose their kids, but realistically, you're going to lose your kid either way if they continue to use. It's only a matter of time. Nowadays, this stuff is no joke.
Well, like you had mentioned, your father. How do you prevent your daughter from going down that same path?
Well, for myself, this has been it's interesting you bring this up because, I was thinking about it recently, and I don't want to hide my past. I don't want to hide what I've been through. And I am going to be very vocal about what I've been through. When my daughter, it's the appropriate time. I'm going to explain to her, hey, You know, daddy at one point was a kid having fun doing these things, experimenting. I had no plans on it getting to where it was going to go, but it did. And unfortunately, addiction, it's, if you have the knowledge to explain this to a child, it makes a lot more sense. And the way I explain this to everybody is addiction is a chemical imbalance, right? Like when you are taking substances, you are interrupting the natural chemicals that are happening in your brain. And when you create a chemical imbalance by just removing the substance, yeah, your body may get better, but you're still left with the chemical imbalance of the brain. So like what do you need to do to stabilize your brain and your body? You need to get help. You may need medication. You may need to see a doctor. Like I feel like a lot of people have the wrong impression. Once I put down the drugs, my life's going to go back to normal and everything's going to be fine. Unfortunately, that's not the case. Because if it was, there wouldn't be relapse. There wouldn't be, people going back to drugs. You know, a lot of people don't truly know what it does to the mind. And without healing the mind, you're going to continue to go back and back and back. It's that's what I was doing wrong the whole time. I wasn't, why I kept relapsing and going back to rehab was I wasn't addressing, the mental components to this, the chemical imbalance aspect. I never believed in medication. Um, you know, and once I eventually was like, all right, I don't know what I'm doing. Let me make some adjustments and let the professionals help me. My life changed, you know?
So it's really, I mean, what your answer is just once they're of a certain age, you want to give them some kind of awareness of what drugs are. You want to let them know before it's too late because yours happened very, very early, man, very
Yep.
early in life. And I've seen other stuff like that as well with other people that I've interviewed. It's just it happens early. Not in every
Does.
case, but it tends to happen early. So if you're able to, whenever you feel the age is right to make your child aware of these things, I don't think it's a bad idea because it may help prevent it, man. I don't know.
Yeah. I think it's crucial, right? Because the time we're in, man, I mean, I see messages every day from children, 14 years old, 15 years old, that are doing fentanyl. Like they're doing fentanyl, they're full blown addicted to it, and they don't know how to tell their parents. They don't know, hey, I don't know how to get off of this. Like, and it's terrifying because at that age, they should be enjoying life and living and experiencing the things that teenagers experience. Like, it's only getting more, it's getting worse and worse. And I hate to say that, and I hate to, it scares me because I have my daughter, but the age that it's starting at is getting younger and younger. And I don't know if there's a lot of factors. Music contributes to it, right? Like nowadays, the music that some of these artists make, they like glorify it and they make it seem cool. And there's young kids that want to sip lean because NLE Chopper does it. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. Like,
No, I get it.
it's crazy.
Yeah, and I know that it does have a big influence, music and outside effects where they see
Yeah.
people that look cool or whatever doing great and they're successful, but
Yeah.
that's what to them it's like, oh well, if he's doing that, then
Yeah.
it must be a good thing to do. But that's not the case at all because that's from what we've heard from your firsthand story today. It's not the case at all. Look at all the stuff you went through from addiction and what it turned into be. But luckily, were able to live. You're here. You're alive today to share your
That's right.
story. And with fentanyl and all the stuff that you were doing, your chances of being here today shouldn't really be here, man. I mean, you should be gone for all you were gone for three times you were pronounced dead,
Yep.
but you were revived to do good things. You still got, I mean, with what you're doing now, the recovery center you got, and the more plans you got for the future, and of course with your platforms you have now,
Yep.
texting kids and helping them out, trying to as much as you can, and just really spreading the awareness of addiction.
Yeah.
That's what you're here doing. That's what you were here for, man.
Appreciate it, man. I
And I've
agree.
Yeah, and I appreciate you coming on my show, man. Could
Yes,
tell
thank
this.
you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, well, you got any final messages you want to leave with the people?
Yeah, man, don't give up. You know, life, let's set aside addiction, right? Anything in life, right? We're bound to make mistakes. We're bound to have obstacles, but the moment you give up is the moment you fail. You know, you just gotta keep trucking, man, and keep pushing. Because to be honest, I've quote unquote failed. You know, 40 some odd times before I got to a point of success. And the one thing though is I didn't give up, you know, and if I could do it, I promise you anybody can do it. Go achieve some goals, make some stuff happen.
Will is a recovering drug addict that has seen and been through a lot of bad things. He is very lucky to be here to share his life story. He died a few times and was brought back to life for a real reason. Will is doing his best to help people that are struggling with addiction. What he is doing is very beneficial to a lot of people. Will is an absolute gentleman. Please comment any key takeaways that you got from this interview. Please share it with anyone that you think will enjoy this type of content. Also, please be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel for more videos like this. At the end of this video, a playlist will pop up of all my other interviews I've done in the past. Thank you again so much for watching, and of course, we'll see you on the next one.